Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by super author Terry Whalin. I say super author because Terry has authored over 60 books and written for more than 50 magazines, and many of his books have sold 100,000 copies or more. That's amazing. So we're going to be talking to the super author today about how he's written so many books and what they're about and everything that he's up to. He's probably going to be writing 60 more. So Terry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Curtis, wonderful to be here with you. I don't know that anybody's ever called me a super author before, but I think that's great.
Absolutely. I don't know if I've ever interviewed an author that has written as many books as you. So why don't you start off telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it was actually when I was in high school that my English teacher, Dr. David Smith, noticed that something in my writing. He encouraged me to join the high school newspaper. And so I did that. I started in the sports area, and I'm kind of a non-sports guy, Curtis. So that was kind of a big deal for me to start writing sports. But I learned the terms and learned how to do that. Ultimately, I became the editor of my high school newspaper, and I decided I really liked writing. So I went to Indiana University, one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country. I joined the writing staff of the daily student newspaper that we did. We had about 100 of us on the writing staff, and we produced a full-size newspaper 6 days a week. So it was kind of a big deal. As a college kid, we blew off our classes. We were writing stories. That's what we were doing back then. And so I thought that's what I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a newspaper reporter. But about halfway through my sophomore year, I had joined a social fraternity, and I had a really rough night. I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys to type my story out. This is in the pre-computer days. So if you made a mistake, you just backed up and X'd out and went on. And so I was muttering to myself, Curtis, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I had no real understanding about what a Christian was, to Curtis. So she encouraged me to go to this little bookstore a couple of blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a few days later. I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And I read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, somebody invited me to this Jesus People gathering in downtown Bloomington. And people were sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And those people had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I've been going the Jesus trail of my life ever since. So instead of joining the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, or one of those kind of newspapers when I graduated from college, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. And so I spent 10 years of my life in linguistics. 3 years among the Southwest Cachiquel people in Guatemala, Central America. I actually have a New Testament on my shelf here that we started back then, which wouldn't have existed if I hadn't have made those kind of choices. And ultimately, I wandered back to my writing. Even with Wycliffe, I was the editorial director when I left Wycliffe, in charge of their face of the mission in print, their magazine, their books, brochures, all that kind of thing. And so I started writing for magazines and got published there, got some stuff published. And I went to a writers' conference. I always encourage writers to go to a conference if they can, because sometimes who you know is almost as important as what you know. And so I was at this conference, and this editor told me she had a problem. And I always listen when editors tell me that kind of thing. And she said, Terry, I I'm a David C. Cook, and we are charged to encourage kids to go to the world, that the world's a big place, but we don't have a single book in our whole line of children's books that says anything about that. What kind of ideas do you have? Well, my kids were little at that time, and so I was reading a lot of children's books to my kids, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead, the fantasy writer, had a set of children's books that he did called Howard Had a Hot Air Balloon, Howard Had a Spaceship, that combined real pictures with a little cartoon character to stir kids' imagination. And so I thought, what if we did that for Wycliffe? What if we took our real pictures and combined it with a little cartoon character to give kids ideas about what they could do around the world? She said to me, that's a great idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to her. And so I made a little note. I went home and wrote it up. And ultimately, that became my first book, Curtis. It came out in 1993, a little book that I wrote called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And that is what sort of spurred me into the whole book writing area. And it's not complicated how I've written these books. I spend a lot of time on it. I write one book at a time, and I've had great opportunities. And now as an editor, I know that I will sit across people and listen to their ideas, and I'll say, that's a great idea. Write that up and send that to me. Well, what I find is that probably only 10 or 15% of the people that I say that to will actually follow through and send me their stuff at the end of the day. So I know that that's part of the real key to why I'm getting so much stuff published is because when somebody asks me to do something, I make a little note, and generally I do it. I send it into them. Now, that doesn't mean I get published, but that means I at least gave myself a chance to get published.
Absolutely. So you have sold over, a lot of your books have sold, 100,000 copies, kind of tell us about that and how that feels, how you made that happen.
Yeah, it's, I usually tell people making books is easy. Selling books, now that's another matter there. And I learned my own lessons about that, Curtis, because I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. They were, making pretty books. They were getting them in the bookstore, giving me advances on the books, all those kinds of things. But when you write those kind of books, the publisher, usually once a year, but sometimes quarterly, will send you a financial statement about how your books are selling. Well, all of my books were in the minus category, that none of them were selling. And I couldn't figure out what in the world I was doing wrong. Well, I was running a little litter agency in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, was having this event in Los Angeles in 2007 called Mega Book Marketing University. And so I went out, I was invited out there. I took pitches from authors during the event, but I also decided to sit there with all 400 of the people that were there listening to the different speakers. And it's almost like during that conference, I'd been asleep and I woke up because one of the speakers at this conference was the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. And Jack has this book called The Success Principles. What does it take to really be successful out there? And the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take that 100% responsibility. We want our publisher or a marketing person or somebody else, please, other than us. But I decided during this event that I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. And I realized how little I was personally doing to be telling people about my book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I was doing very little otherwise to tell people. So I started the blog. I got in on the early days of blogging. I blog once a week. I write an article every week, and I've done that over and over. So my blog now has over 1,700 entries in it. I have this little thing that goes out there and searches for my name on the internet, see if it finds it. About a year ago, I found this article on the top 27 content producers out there. Now, they say there's over 600 million blogs out there, but they pinpointed the top 27 people like Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Goins and people like that. And my name was among those 27. And it's not anything magical or anything that I do, but I've been consistent and persistent in blogging all this time. And that's one of the keys. People forget, even those co-authors on Chicken Soup for the Soul, Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, they were rejected, Curtis, over 160 times for those Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I mean, that's a lot of no that you get from somebody out there to be able to do that. But they persisted, and they finally found the little publisher in Florida to publish the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. And they told their publisher that they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. Well, their publisher laughed at them. They just thought that was a ridiculous idea to sell 1 million books because they'd never sold 1 million copies of anything. But, it took them a year and a half to sell that first 1 million copies of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And the way they did it, they told about this, is that they practiced what they called the rule of 5. They got up every day and they did 5 things to tell people about their book. They did a podcast, a radio interview, a newspaper article, a magazine article, a live event, a guest blog post, something to be telling people. And I think that's one of the secrets to really being successful with your book. I mean, statistically, they've pretty much proven with all the self-publishing books and everything that's going on out there in the market, there's over 11,000 new books that come out every day. I mean, talk about a competition. That's a big competitive market there. And the only way you as an author can really break through that and do something is to be proactively telling people about your book. They've pretty much proven that somebody has to hear about your book probably a dozen times before they actually decide that they're going to buy it. So you as the author need to be out there. And there's a lot of different ways to get out there and do it. That's for sure.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Well, talk about some of your biggest influences. Who influenced you besides your teacher in school, to do what you do?
Yeah, I guess some of the biggest influences to me have been at writers' conferences, the different teachers that I've had, the different people that I've met. I've also had the opportunity, Curtis, to interview more than 150 best-selling authors. So I've sat with these people that have been successful, and they've told me about how they practice their craft and the kinds of things that they do. In the book business, if you sell 5,000 copies of your book during the lifetime of the book, that's a good number. But in the magazine business, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your magazine article. And so I always encourage people, if they want to write, one of the best ways for them to get started is in the magazine area, because, books are long. Let's face it. I mean, writing a 50,000 to 100,000 word book, it takes a lot of energy in order to be able to do that. Where a magazine article is short. You can write, it can be 1,000, 1,200 words. With a magazine article, you learn how to have a good headline, how to have a good start, a good big beginning, middle, and end, how to write that article to a single point. Those are all basic skills that you can learn and you can practice with that shorter piece of writing. And almost every magazine, Curtis, will take what they call personal experience stories. I mean, all of us have strange and different personal experiences. Write those up. And if you write those on a particular topic, and let's say you write a number of them, if they all relate to each other, they can be chapters in your book. So it's all a matter of looking at your writing skills and how you're doing and what you're doing, and just seeing how you could put it together in a format that would work for a book out there. But that's just a basic idea that all of us can practice and do.
Well, tell the listeners about some of your top books, or the books that you feel is the best. Tell us what we can expect when we read them and where to get them.
Yeah, I've had great opportunities. I've done biographies on people like Billy Graham, Luis Palau, Chuck Colson, Vanetta Flowers, the first African American ever to win a gold medal in the Winter Olympics. I wrote her book called Running on Ice. I wrote a diet book that sold a lot of copies called First Place. I've written devotional books, just all different kinds of things. One of the books that I wrote out of my own frustration, though, Curtis. I became an acquisitions editor, about 15, 16 years ago. Right now, I am an acquisitions editor at Morgan James. I've been there for 12 years, a New York publishing house, but this is actually the third company that I'm working for in the acquisitions area, which means I'm the first reader often of this material to see if it's the right book that we're going to publish and that kind of thing. Well, my very first company that I worked for, David C. Cook, I was actually a little fascinated, but also frustrated as an editor, because sometimes I didn't get the actual piece that I needed from the author in the submission to be able to get them a book contract. So out of my own frustration, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. Because no matter what kind of book you're writing, whether it's a novel or a nonfiction book or a children's book or whatever it is, every book needs a business plan. And that's what your book proposal is. It's basically saying, look, this is who I'm writing the book for. This is who the competition is. This is what I'm going to do to be telling people about the book. Now, that book proposal book that I wrote has been real well received out there. It's got over 150 5-star reviews. People have used it to get a literary agent, to get a book publishing deal, to get an advance. All kinds of great things have happened from that. But publishing has changed through the years. And so a couple of years ago, I wrote a revision of this book that's out there now, the revised edition of Book Proposals That Sell. And people can get that revised edition from me if they go to bookproposals.ws for website, bookproposals.ws. And I give away the whole book. If you go over there, there's basically the cover, there's a little information about the book, and this big button that says free book. Now, the reason I give away that free ebook is because at Morgan James, we've learned that if you get that ebook from me and you start to read that ebook, there is a high probability that you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So you basically, as an author, you lose nothing by giving away that free ebook. And those free ebooks actually drive print book sales at the end of the day. So I want people to go over and get that proposal book, because you can learn a lot about publishing, but you can also learn how to put together something that's going to catch the attention of the editor out there and really help you move along with your writing and your dreams of getting published.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Yeah, I just finished a book for a ministry that hasn't really come out here yet, but it's 90 devotions about Bible characters that made a pivot, that made a change in the direction of their life. And so I hope that book will really help people out there. But the book that I'm really excited about, that I want to tell people about, is I wrote this book called 10 Publishing Myths, and insights every author needs to succeed. And the reason I wrote this book, Curtis, is because from talking to authors, I find that many of them have unrealistic expectations. They, like the very first one says that I will make a lot of money with my book. Everybody believes, whether they self-publish or whether they go with a traditional publisher, they believe that their book is going to make money. Well, that's not really true because of the volume of stuff that's out there. And you write a book for a lot of different reasons, but making money often is not why you write it. You write it because it gives you authority. It opens up doors for you to be able to speak places like your Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary or those kind of places. It just opens doors for you. So I wanted authors to understand that there's a lot in the publishing process that is outside of our control as authors. I don't know whether my publisher is going to get the book into bookstores or not. I don't know whether people are going to go in there and find my book and buy my book or not. But there are some things that I can do as an author. And so that's really what I emphasized in this 10 Publishing Myths book. Every chapter has what I call a myth buster action, something that they can practically do. So, for example, I talk to authors all the time and they'll say, well, my readers are over on Instagram, or my readers are on LinkedIn or Facebook or X. Well, those are all fine platforms, but the problem with that is they are rented platforms. That's the way we look at them, because, I mean, right or wrong, I could be kicked off of those platforms tomorrow. I could intentionally or unintentionally violate their terms and get kicked off. So you don't want to build your house over there on sand, in a sense, on those kind of platforms. Instead, you want to build your work on your own website, your own blog, your own newsletter, those kind of things that you can actually take control of. And that's really what I emphasize in 10 Publishing Myths, and want people to do that. I want them to get this book so much that I've created a website where somebody can get this book for only $10, including the shipping, along with over $200 worth of bonuses. They just have to go to publishingoffer.com, and then they can get this book from me, and I'll be happy to pack it up and mail it out to them.
Okay, well, do you still have the terrywhalin.com website?
I do. I still have terrywhalin.com website, and I have I have a lot of different material out there online.
Okay. We'll close this out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Yeah, as I was putting together this 10 Publishing Myths book, Curtis, Alice Kreider, who's an acquisitions editor, when she sent me her endorsement, she told me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, I'll bite. What's the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so what I decided to do, Curtis, I decided to write that chapter. And when we designed the book, we designed that chapter to look exactly like the rest of the book. And people can get that from me for free if they go to terrylinks.com/11th myth, 11th myth. And you put in your first name and your email address, and then you can get that chapter from me for free. And I guess you asked for some closing remarks here. One of the things I'd really like people to know, as authors, we hear no a lot. We get rejected, you get ghosted, you send your stuff out there into the world, you don't hear any response, you just think, well, gee, nobody wants my stuff. Well, I've been in some of the top literary agencies and publishers in New York City, for example, and when I'm in those places, it's always interesting to me that their question every time to me is, Terry, where's the next best-selling novel? Where's the next best-selling nonfiction book? Who's that person? How can I get in touch with them? And what that shows me is that even though you may be getting ghosted or no response, understand that all of us are looking. We're actively looking for that diamond in the rough. We're reading our email. We're reading our physical mail. We're looking for that. So just keep at it and be encouraged that there is opportunity out there, but you as an author have to take action and really seize the day for that to happen.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. Terry's got a lot going on, so if you know of any authors or aspiring authors, please follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Jump on your favorite podcast app, share the show, check it out, follow, review. You have any guest or suggestion topics? Curtis Jackson 1978 at att.net is the place to send them. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. We truly couldn't do it without you. Terry, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
Curtis, I just appreciate this opportunity so much. Thank you.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.